America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
Please subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. Today, we are joined by Tom Sullivan. Tom is the Vice President of Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, working with Chambers of Commerce and the U.S. Chamber's nationwide network. Tom, welcome to Main Street Matters.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Alfredo. It's great to see you all.
Thank
Well,
you.
it seems like everybody's in such a good mood these days and starting to think about 2025 and what's on our wish list. What are you doing over at the Chamber and focused on for 2025 and your priorities?
Well, we're all in good moods because we reflect the upbeat and optimism from Main Streets all across America. I mean, the three of us get to advocate for small business owners every day. And when they're in a good mood, we're in a good mood. So that explains my bright, shiny face. As far as what we're advocating, at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we are looking at everything through the lenses of growth. So if something kind of comes across our radar, comes up in Congress, comes up at the White House, that does not put us on a path to sustainable 3% growth, then we don't get involved, or quite frankly, sometimes we oppose it. But when we look at things that this new Congress is already telling us that they're going to do, the new White House is already telling us that they're going to do, it seems as though we are in sync across the board about looking at economic policy through the lens of growth, and more importantly, sustainable 3% growth.
I agree. There's a lot of alignment there on policy issues. So we're obviously excited too. I know that you just recently issued your small business outlook. What were sort of the key takeaways on that?
Well, a couple of things. So first of all, our survey that we do every quarter with our partners MetLife, it actually surveyed small business owners right before the election. And maybe we could talk a little bit about what we're hearing after the election, because there's some big differences. One thing that will not be surprising to either of you, and that is that inflation continues to be the top concern. This is actually 2.5 years. Every time we survey small business owners, they say, we're still worried about inflation.
Yep.
Now, despite that, we still see 72% of small businesses are anticipating higher sales next year. Now, that's a jump 7 points up from when we asked the same question a year ago. So things are looking pretty good as far as small businesses, even before the election. And I'm hoping, again, we get a chance to talk about some survey results from some of our friends at NFIB, CNBC, our SBE Council, some others have done some research. Yeah, yes, and JC, of course.
We do a small business poll as well, about 6 times a year. And we have what's called a small business IQ, the SBIQ quotient, which kind of measures the optimism of small businesses. There's 7 factors that go into it regarding how they feel about their own business, the economy in general, their present outlook, their future outlook on hiring and sales and everything like that. We saw the SBIQ move to the highest level we've seen in about 40 months. And the driver of that, you won't be surprised, is their future outlook, because their current, that particular measure jumped by about 7 points. So that was the big jump in the overall score. But their current outlook for the economy is inflation, inflation, inflation. I mean, that's the big issue for them. They're still feeling it. They're still kind of suffering under those policies that are hurting them. But futuristically, they're optimistic. 40% of them tell us that they plan to hire next year in the next 12 months. So all of that is just, I mean, 180-degree change from pre-election and what we had been seeing all year. So I assume that some of your surveys are showing the same thing.
They are. So Elaine, one thing that's really important, I think interesting to see from our latest MetLife Small Business Index is like right before the election, what were some small businesses thinking about? And we saw the biggest increase of concern for federal red tape burden. And small businesses had really, quite frankly, become sick of the federal government's micromanagement of how they do business, how they hire, how they buy and sell companies, stuff like that. And it had reached kind of a crescendo where you had our survey results had over 50% of small business owners felt as though they were just being overwhelmed with paperwork. Then importantly, when asked about, well, how do you think some of your larger business competitors are dealing with red tape? And 69% of our small business owners said, we feel as though it's a bigger burden on small business because we don't have an accounting department. We don't have a federal regulatory compliance department. This is us as owners. You know, we're the CPA, we're the lawyer, we're the custodian, we're the owner, we're the employer, all of which have federal requirements. And before the election, they were saying enough is enough. And I think one sharp contrast that we're seeing in small business optimism after the election is that President-elect Trump, in his first term, had the greatest deregulatory agenda in the history of the unified federal executive.
Yeah, I read that he has vowed to, his first promise when he came on the first term was 2 for 1. For every new one, he'd get rid of 2, and he far surpassed that. I've seen numbers as high as getting rid of 22 for every new one, but it varies depending on the publication. I know what he's vowing this time is to get rid of 10 for every new rule that is introduced, which is incredible. And we're really excited because we had worked with Senator Joni Ernst on some legislation called the Prove It Act over on the Senate side. And then Congressman Brad Finstead introduced on the House side. And so we worked with them, moving it through committee and passed last week. So we're very excited about that because I know that the next Congress still has to take it up. I know the process on the sausage making, but to get it this far and through on the House side, and plus we have the support of the Speaker on it as well. Basically small business has a seat at the table now on the regulatory process, which I think is incredible. And the regulatory agencies have to do something that is such a strange concept. They have to do their job and measure the impact of negative consequences to small businesses.
You know, Elaine, this is probably a good point to just share with your viewers and your listeners how much we work together. I mean, it was just about a year and a half ago when Alfredo and I were in Iowa with Senator Ernst, who will soon be Chairwoman Ernst, the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. We were meeting with her and small businesses in Iowa to talk about that very thing. Talk about, all right, how do we get small businesses at the table, and critical to them being at the table, make sure that regulators listen to how small business owners would deal with challenges like clear air, cleaner water, border protection, financial security, cybersecurity. This idea that we actually listen to the ideas from small business owners instead of telling them what to do is it's finally passed the House, as you said, and we're very optimistic that we'll see it reintroduced in the next Congress and with Senator Ernst's leadership get through the Senate as well. And I think it's a nice place to kind of explain to your listeners and viewers really how much the Job Creators Networks, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and other organizations really do work together every day to help small business.
Well, we have, as you know, 30 plus million small business owners that count on us to do it right here in DC, right? And work with each other. I mean, I remember that meeting with Senator Ernst, and it was so exciting to see, her talk about it and hear the input, and to actually see it come out of, on both sides. And we have to make sure that actually gets taken up, because I think it actually gives us, like Elaine said, a seat at the table, which has been so important and missing in the past. I mean, we all know what happened with Dodd-Frank, and unfortunately, our community banks. I think from your polling and what you're hearing from our small business owners is absolutely correct. I mean, the burden of the regulatory umbrella on them is far greater in terms of a burden than it is, I think, on our large corporations, just because they don't have the resources. I mean, $2 trillion basically is my last estimate that I've seen of regulations that hit the economy with the Biden administration. I mean, that $2 trillion has to go somewhere. And I know we talk about inflation being a tax, but regulations are a tax as well. And so all that is really, I think, burdening our small businesses. And so seeing that, lifted, to your point, to be able to allow our small businesses to grow and to thrive, I think it's just going to be critical.
Yeah, it certainly is reflected in the optimism you're seeing in your surveys. And I think the latest survey from NFIB has optimism. Like it looks like a launch of one of Elon Musk's rockets, that the optimism has gone up so quickly. And I think we're really digging into some of the reasons why small businesses are so optimistic. And I don't want to paint just kind of a roses and sunshine picture that would at all convey any type of naivete to small businesses. That's not the case at all. I mean, when we talk about the expectation for higher sales, any small business owner will say to you, well, yeah, we know we're going to have higher sales. What we don't know is how much inflation will eat into those sales. And all three of us know that the more profit a small business owner makes, the more they're able to reinvest it back into their business to grow their business, provide better benefits for their employees, scale up their business to help their community. All of these things depend on inflation not eating away at those profits that are necessary for reinvestment and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we talk about inflation, I mean, I know President President-elect Trump, whichever one you want to choose on that one, has talked a lot about drill, baby, drill, right? Bringing back the U.S. to an energy dominant position. That seems to be so critical to address inflation for our small business owners, and to kind of almost, in a way, I think we might have to enter kind of a deflationary period from that perspective, but then comes back to your point on growth. That makes the growth component that much more important. How can we help our small businesses grow through some of the policy making we're going to be talking about in 2025, i.e. the Tax and Jobs Act, for example?
Thank you for at least opening the door for a conversation about really what we've been focused on now for about 5 months. I would say that we're at the 20-yard line, marching forward on really a pretty big playing field when it comes to making sure that the pro-growth provisions of the tax code that are set to expire at the end of 2025 are made permanent. And there's a challenge, I think, that we have as advocates, and a challenge that small business owners have, is that small business owners are working so darn hard. When we walk up to them and say, hi, are you concerned about the 20% deduction that is about to go away unless Congress makes it permanent? They kind of scratch their head and say, well, like, what the heck are you talking about? And so meeting small business owners where they are, and when they're about to file their quarterly payment, and asking them, what's going to happen if that quarterly payment next year is 30 to 35% more? Where are you going to get that money? And then all of a sudden, the small business owner is like, holy crap, I'm going to have to fire some people. I'm not able to get the expansion that we've been planning for 3 or 4 years. So rolling down what's at stake in the tax debate, I think, is a real challenge for all of us in the advocacy community. And then once small business owners realize, wow, if this particular deduction goes away, my growth plans end up in the garbage pail. Once that happens, I think unleashing the support to keep those pro-growth provisions like the 20% deduction will just convince Congress almost immediately about what has to be
Now,
done.
now, Tom, from my perspective, we probably as a conservative group, let's say, or as Republicans, I know you're bipartisan or nonpartisan, but in terms of who got the Tax Cut Jobs Act passed, it was the Republican Party. It seems as though they could have done a little bit better on selling that win, because I think in some of our polling, we showed that maybe about a third of our small business owners actually understood how they benefit from the Tax Cut Jobs Act, which is a shame. It kind of circles back to your point now, is that we have to make sure people, our small businesses, are aware that they did, yes, benefit from that, and what they were able to get from it, and what's going to happen, to them when it goes away. And but before we talk even further on this, can we kind of, for our listeners that aren't even aware actually of this, let's kind of focus on the two main provisions that have helped our small business owners in the current Tax and Jobs Act. Would you mind going through those two?
Sure. So there's two parts of tax policy that are unique to small business that we're really focused on. One is a little bit embarrassing to talk about, but I might as well get it out, like clear the air and just have at it. And that is immediate expensing for research and development. So for over 40 years, the United States, recognizing the importance of R&D and being really the world leader in innovation, enabled large and small businesses to immediately deduct research and development expenses. That went away a year and a half ago. And so now these small business owners are having to sometimes amortize research and development expenses, which includes staff, over 5 to 15 years. Like amortizing what you're paying staff over 5 to 15 years, it doesn't make sense.
And
it's almost impossible.
How did that immediate expensing that was, in that first year of the tax and job, how did that help our small business owners?
Oh, well, I generally go right to Natalie Caddis, who runs a thermoplastic manufacturing company in Salt Lake City. She had 3 full-time R&D specialists that allow for them to produce state-of-the-art products that help prevent electrical utilities from shorting out when an animal comes in contact with a live electricity wire. So basically, when you're driving along and you see at the top of a telephone pole this plastic covering that prevents a bird from being electrocuted, that's coming from Natalie's business or one of Natalie's partners. In order for her to kind of continually make her product the best and compete with some multinational companies, she has to invest in R&D. But her cash flow is so important that amortizing an expense on research and development over 5 to 15 years, it just doesn't make sense for a small business like Natalie's. I mean, cash is king when it comes to a small business owner trying to make payroll, trying somehow to grow. And when all of a sudden you're taking that cash flow away, then it disproportionately harms small business. And so that went away, and we're trying to reinstate that. And it's been, we have bipartisan agreement in Congress that this should be done, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been done. So that is, looking backwards, that's a mistake we've been trying to fix for over a year, and that's critically important to small business.
Yeah.
Now, looking forward, when you look at the 2017 law, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, there are particular provisions in there that are pro-growth. There's one provision that is particularly applicable to small business, and that is a 20% deduction for pass-through businesses. So sole props, LLCs, S corps, the majority of which are small businesses. That 20% deduction right off the top has allowed small business owners to reinvest those savings into those businesses. And it is set to expire after 2025. And so we believe that is a cliff, otherwise known as the tax cliff. And we sure as heck don't want small businesses to fall off that cliff. And so we are asking Congress to make that 20% deduction permanent. There's bipartisan legislation that's kind of chugged along in the House and Senate, but hasn't gotten across the finish line. Now, the good news is we have incoming Ways and Means chairman, we've got Senate Finance, and the President of the United States all recognizing that making this permanent is critical for small businesses and American competitiveness. So we have to get it done. But just because you get certain people agreeing with something doesn't mean our job's going to be easy.
Right.
And so we are gearing up to make that case to Congress. Quite frankly, we're gearing up with you to help small businesses make that case to Congress. We're pretty optimistic, but it's not going to be an easy challenge for us to be successful in. But I mean, amongst the three of us and the broader coalition of small business advocates, I'm pretty optimistic that we'll get it done. It just won't be easy.
Yeah, no, it won't be easy, unfortunately. And I think, it's funny. I actually had a very heated conversation with somebody about the benefits of those two provisions. And they were arguing with me that, no, but our small business owners need that long-term amortization because of, they need, I'm like, no, it's about cash flow, guys. You obviously have never had a small business because cash flow is king. Cash is king, right? And so those two things allow people to have more cash to back in their business, which I think we need to emphasize. And so, and to your point, I think, there are folks like NFIB and others out there like us that are pushing for this. And I think, Tom, it's probably incumbent on you and I and others to form a tight knit one voice on this one, because I know we all kind of rib each other about things we each do better or differently than the other, but on this one I think we all have to be rowing the same direction to make sure it happens. Because I sat down with a Scalise's team and I found out that what they're using as a baseline on the the sliding scale that basically goes away. That they're using that zero base as their new starting point. And so we got to make sure that immediate expensing starts back at what it was right at the beginning of the Tax and Jobs Act and not at the end of it.
Yeah, like you, I generally just restate the learnings that I get from the small business owners who I get to work with. And they do shed some light on the misinformation about, no, actually small businesses want amortization.
Right.
No,
I'm like, nice.
They want the cash. But one example that is just so clear in my mind just happened recently with Congressman Dave Schweikert's office from Arizona. One of our small business leaders is a gentleman who sells hay, or if you want to be technical, he sells alfalfa out of Buckeye, Arizona. And he was sitting down with Congressman Schweikert's staff talking about the 20% deduction. He said, look, I sell hay. I don't know about all this complex stuff, and quite frankly, not entirely sure about what this all means. What I do know is that in 2018, I started saving for this piece of equipment that I'm finally able to buy next year. And this equipment is going to enable for me to bale hay, put the hay on my truck, which I can't do anymore. This guy's he's a little bit older than I am. He can't lift the hay like he used to. And it's going to cost a certain amount of money. And the savings that he has been able to sock away since 2018 are going to allow for him to buy this piece of equipment. And Congressman Schweikert's staff was great. He said, well, like, where are you going to get the equipment? And Dick Cardew, who is the small business owner, he listed the guy who's going to buy it from, which is a local Buckeye business. And now all of a sudden you realize what this deduction means.
Right.
It means that he is making an investment that's going to help his business. He's actually buying it from a neighbor who benefits from the sale. And it's just really amplifying those stories. And then through our collective work, bringing just that really loud chorus to Washington, D.C., that is not going to take compromise for an answer. Because this whole idea of like, oh, well, what if we tweak this and what if we tweak that? A, it makes the darn tax code more complicated. And B, it removes the certainty that's necessary for small business owners to plan more than a week or a month in advance. And so it's going to take that collective voice of millions of small business owners to say, this is what I need, this is what my community needs, and we're not taking compromise for an answer. Let's work together from a pro-growth agenda and make this 20% deduction permanent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tom, I don't know about what your thoughts are on this, but I think it's incumbent on us big three, yourself, JCN, and NFIB, to work together on this one, holding hands. I don't know about you, but I'd love to, if after January we think about pulling all the folks who are involved. I know Grover, for example, American Tax Reform is involved in it as well. Steve Moore, of course, Community Unleash Prosperity. We should all get around a table and I think try to agree on what a consistent voice and communication on this is, because I actually don't think it's actually going to be easy from hearing. And so, I throw that out as a thought to you. I'd love to work with you on this, and I know Elaine, of course, would as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We. I mean, like I had said, we're getting close to the college football championship, so I still can use these football analogies. We really are. I mean, the collective group of folks we really are on the 20-yard line. Now, some of us who have actually played football know that even getting to the 20-yard line sometimes is really, really hard.
Yeah.
But we've still got roughly 80 yards to go. We're not going to
can't fumble.
No, we're not taking a field goal as a victory either. We're going all the way through right into the other end zone. But
and we don't want to punt on this one either.
No punch. We're just straight through. We're in an overtime situation. First one who scores wins. We've already seen the commitment from Congress to have two approaches early in the year, as well as working with President-elect Trump's team. One is going to be on border security and energy. One is going to be on the pro-growth provisions of the tax code, both which are great. And whether or not one is first and one is second doesn't really matter. We've just got to. I agree with you. We just got to get our ducks in a row and get them marching forward. So now I've got ducks playing football. I don't know, but you're right.
I always thought the Ducks were the ice hockey, but that's all right. So
well, maybe it's the Oregon Ducks. I don't know.
No. I think you're right, and I love even your terminology. And I think, Elaine, we need to start using this right away, and that's part of, I think, why we should all meet. Two pro-growth provisions. I think that's exactly what it is of the tax code. I think that's the way to think about it. That's the way to communicate them. That's what they were, and that's what they need to continue to be. And so, maybe the folks at Heritage can host us, or I know you got a couple of big spots over at your building. Maybe after the New Year's, we can all entertain getting together for maybe a half a day or so.
Oh yeah. There's certainly a lot at stake, and the more times we're able to kind of sing from the same song sheet, better off small businesses are at the end of the day.
Yeah, agreed. Elaine?
Well, I want to just ask you where people can go to learn more about the chamber and what you're doing for small businesses there.
Oh, sure. Well, we have our website. Let me give you two websites. One is uschamber.com, but the other actually is it's our small business digital platform. It's called CO. So CO. It can be found just by Googling Co. U.S. Chamber, or if you want to be technical, you could say growwithco.com. This small business digital platform really talks about the same things that we're talking about here, but does so through the voices of actual small business owners. This small business digital platform really blew up during COVID, where we had small business owners explaining to others how they got PPP loans.
Right.
And instead of us telling, okay, this is what you do, which is fine, but sometimes small business owners want to learn from their peers, other small business owners. And Co has been a remarkable platform for us to get the word out on various techniques small business owners can use to become more successful. And we also kind of sprinkling some policy once in a while too, just to make sure that they're informed of the latest, greatest.
I think that's great. Growwithco.com, and Co is C-O.
Correct. Yep.
Excellent.
Great. Tom, one more quick question for you. Top 5 cities or top 2 states, let's say, that you see growth formation for small businesses.
Well, so first of all, we work with about 6,800 state, local, regional chambers of commerce.
So they're all great.
They are all the greatest. I don't want to pick which of my teenage boys is like a better son. That isn't that. So I'll just share.
We all have our favorites.
I'll share with you what I see in the data that you also are familiar with. You see, the Southeast and Texas, those two parts of the country really have seen tremendous growth and are projected to grow even more in the coming years. When I look at the United States and I look at where do you see growth, I try to look at, I'm from New England, so I try to look at New England, see how they're doing. Unfortunately, many times their regulatory climate mirrors California's, and that dampens entrepreneurial activity. But on the other hand, a lot of universities in New England, and so they have a lot of spin-offs and entrepreneurial activity. But the short answer to your question is we look at Florida, Texas, and the states immediately surrounding them to see more sustained growth long-term. We generally see more business friendliness in those areas. Then we generally go up to the Dakotas in that part of the country because of some of the shale natural gas boom. We see some really interesting economic activity there too. And last but not least, I got to give a shout out to my friends out in Utah who had really tried to cement this state a pro-business state in Utah, where they want to be the banking center for entrepreneurship, and then expand that to the West Coast and all the way across the country to the East Coast. I think Utah is worth looking at on how their government leaders are trying to make them a small business friendly state.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, maybe, like I said, we can kick around the idea of even having like a big small business summit down in one of those southeastern states. I would say Utah, but I don't like the cold, so.
Well, anytime we spend time outside of the Beltway meeting with small business owners, you can count me in.
All right, we'll do that. I'll give you a call and we'll chat about some ideas. Thank you, Tom, for your time.
Thanks, Alfredo. Thank you, Elaine.
Yeah, Tom, thanks so much for joining us and taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters today. And for those listening, thanks so much for joining us. And you can find out more what Tom's doing at the Chamber at growwithco.com. That's growwithco.com. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.